one of our readers will ask me, how do I pronounce this name? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Nobody knows any better. All right. So today we are in the fourth chapter of Esther, and this is the part of the story, if you know anything about the story, this is the part of the story you know. And it's the part where Esther is called to take action on behalf of her people. Now, what happened at the beginning of the chapter is Mordecai is really, you can tell, kind of taken aback by the response. Now, obviously, he probably feels somewhat responsible for what's going on. He was the one who was not paying honor to Haman, and did probably rightly would expect some sort of response because of it, but no doubt was not expecting the over-the-top response that he got. And that's why he chose to do something that happens a lot in the Bible, which is to put on sackcloth. And this comes up a lot, and it comes up a lot as an understanding when people feel like there's something they need to repent of, or they feel bad about something, or they want to draw attention to something that is going on. If there's an injustice being perpetrated and people want to draw attention to it, one of the ways they will do it is they will put on sackcloth. Now, it's probably actually a little bit more of a accurate translation of the actual word to translate it instead of sackcloth more as like haircloth, because that's what it was. It was cloth made out of like goat hair and things like that. But I don't think most of us want to read in our Bible haircloth, because that sounds really gross, right? It kind of does. But that's what it was. And they had this around. You kind of wonder, well, why would you even have this around? I have this question, like, why does Mordecai even have this? Right? Like, why would you have a shirt made of, like, the hair of a goat that's going to be really uncomfortable to wear? Well, the secret is kind of in the name. This is kind of like, it's similar to what you might consider something like burlap or, that we'd use today, and had similar purposes. So sackcloth or haircloth would be things that they would have around, not for people to wear, but for like carrying goods and, grains and, all those sorts of things, because it was cheap to manufacture, and you just use it in that way. So sometimes how this is depicted is you can almost picture somebody with like a burlap sack of potatoes, like with a head hole and armholes like cut out, like wearing that around, which would obviously, even today, I think, garner some attention, right? Like if somebody was walking around with a sack of potatoes on, and you'd probably start asking some questions as to why on earth that person is doing it. And that's what Mordecai's doing. He's both it's an act of repentance, but it's also an act to draw attention to what's going on. And he captures the attention, and he can see the attention, and the person whose attention he gets is Esther. Now, Esther, if you caught, had to go ask what was going on. The decree has gone out. The people know, Mordecai knows, the people in the streets know, everybody knows. For some reason, Esther doesn't seem to know. And this kind of gives us a clue, several clues, as to what Esther's life is like right now, right? She hasn't been called to the king for a month, so she's not doing that. You would imagine that the place where she is staying, so she's staying in the harem, she's staying in this group of, she's staying with all the other women of the court. I don't imagine 2,500 years ago women were much different than they are today, and there was a healthy amount of gossip happening. Sorry. Let's just imagine. Anytime you put enough people together, there's going to be gossip happening. There's probably no doubt no end of gossip happening, but Esther is clearly not a part of it. So she is on the outside. She's literally on the outside of her people, right? She is secluded from her people and her family. She's secluded from Mordecai. She's secluded from everybody she knows. And even within the palace, she is clearly secluded and kept apart from everybody else. And you can kind of guess why, right? I mean, there was this kind of like competition for who got to be queen, right? And she won, and no doubt others are not necessarily happy about that. So Esther's on the outside. She's being kept isolated. She doesn't know what's going on. And she sees Mordecai out her window, literally out her window, running around, literally wearing a sack of potatoes. And she asks the honest question, what on earth is going on? So that's when she sends this servant out to talk to him to find out what's happening. And of course, Mordecai sends word back to explain what it is. It's also in this moment that Mordecai realizes that maybe, just maybe, Esther could do something about this. And so he sends word, as we heard, he sends word to Esther and says, you need to go to the king and you need to talk to him on our behalf, right? Because you are part of this people too. And you need to you can do whatever you can do to see if this can somehow not happen. Now, what's really interesting here in this story, in this chapter, is this chapter is for a lot of reasons, but it marks a really strong transition. It marks a transition in Esther and how she responds and how she behaves. Because up until this point, Esther has pretty much done whatever it is other people asked her to do, right? If you go back into chapter 2 and chapter 3, when Esther was first actually put up to be queen, nowhere in there is that ever posed to Esther as a question. She is sent by Mordecai, her caregiver, Mordecai, her kind of adopted father, to go and participate, in this royal contest. She's not really asked. Her consent is not sought, nor is it given. She just does what she's told to do. And up until this point in the story, she has basically been doing what she's told to do. Right? She hasn't been invited in to see the king, so she hasn't seen the king, right? She hasn't been invited to do all these other things. She's not part of what's going on. She is just sitting there doing whatever it is she's told to do until now. And now she starts to make a transition. And instead of just saying, okay, Mordecai, I'll do what you asked, she starts to really, honestly, push back a little bit. And there's obvious reasons why she might do that. Her life could literally be in danger from what she's doing. And so we get this back and forth between Esther and Mordecai. And really what's happening here is Esther is, one, pushing back for sure, but two, whatever it is that Esther is going to do from this point forward, whatever action she's going to take, she's making very clear that she's doing it because she's choosing to do it. She is no longer a passive person in the story, merely doing what she's told. She is now an active participant in the story, making her own choices and making her own decisions about how she's going to act and when. And that's why we get this little back and forth. It's not that she doesn't want to save her people. Far from it. Of course she does. And we actually get a wonderful little insight into her character and that the strength that she has. Instead, what's happening here is she is choosing to make her own choice. So while she will eventually do what Mordecai wants her to do, she's going to do it because she decided to do it, and she's going to ask them to be a part of it. So she's like, I'm not just going to go do this. You are going to be a part of this. If not, you cannot do it with me physically. You're going to be with me spiritually. So not only you have a request of me, you have a request of me as the queen, I also have a request of you. You need to go and fast and support me and be part of it. Esther is transitioning from being just a passive figure to being one that is taking an active role in what's going on. This is, of course, a transition that most of us eventually have to make in life. And it's interesting, I wish this was planned, but it's not. It was not, but it's interesting that we're talking about this on Graduation Sunday. Because that is one of the things that happens at graduations along the way, is graduations mark a change. They make a change in one part of a life to another. And whether we're graduating high school or graduating college or graduating preschool, with each graduation we become a little bit more responsible for our lives. We become a little bit more responsible for what's going on. We become a little bit more responsible for where we will go next. Graduations are always decision points, and it may be obvious to us, and we may be following others' advice when we make those decisions, but they are decisions at the point nonetheless that only we can make. In a way, Esther is graduating from being a passive person to being an active participant in what's going on. And we need her, in order for the story to continue and get where it goes, we need her to make that transition. Because Mordecai is also right. There is something that only Esther can do, because she is two things at once. She is part of God's people. She is an Israelite. She is a Jew. She's one of the people who is being persecuted. And she's also the queen. Nobody else is both of those things. Nobody else can do that work. Only she can. And now we come to this point where she is claiming for herself the role that she has, the role that she's been given. Now, this is something that, again, we all have to do. We all have to do throughout life. We all have to understand who we are and where we are. And we all have to ask ourselves, what is this work? What is mine to do? And in order to do that, in order to know what it is that is ours to do, we first have to know and claim who we are. Esther has to claim it about ourselves, and we all have that too. Now, I went back and forth on how to illustrate the story today. But since it's Graduate Sunday, and since we did the preschool graduation yesterday, which was super fun, and anytime I do stuff around the preschool and the preschool kids, and especially the preschool adults, I always get asked two questions, which is one is, you're really the pastor of this church? I'm like, yeah. And two, are you the one that reads to the kid with the puppet? And I'm like, yes, I am. And I realized this yesterday, that most of you have not had the opportunity, unless you've been a special helper on a day that I'm reading or something, haven't had the opportunity to enjoy that. So, children's books being the amazing source of wisdom that they are, I just thought it would be kind of fun, because we're actually kind of having fun in this worship series, to give you a taste of what happens downstairs. So I got a stool, and I got my puppet. It's a familiar puppet. And we have a book on kind of today's subject. So if you don't mind, you can join me in a little story time with Pastor and Peep as we do downstairs. So, and like we do downstairs, if you all wouldn't mind just saying good morning to Peep. Good morning. Well, good morning, everybody. How you doing? This is a very different crowd than I am used to. Yes, but they're all very nice, Peep, I promise. And they're like, okay, if you say so. All right, so we have a book today called Bear and Duck. Ooh, I'm a duck. Like, we do know that, Peep. All right. So this is a good story for us today. All right. We all ready? All right, there you go. I should have put some sitting spots out. That's what I should have done. All right. Bear was a bear, and in most ways, he was like any other bear. He was big and furry, he slept all winter, and he ate lots and lots of honey. But in one big way, Bear was not like other bear. Bear's problem was he wished he weren't a bear at all. But what can he be by a bear? I'm like, I don't know, let's find out. He was tired of sleeping all winter, his fur felt hot in the summer, and he was sick of all the angry bees. Well, maybe he shouldn't steal their honey. Like, well, yeah. Leave me alone, he growled, rubbing his sore, slung nose. That's it, Bear decided. I'm done being a bear. Just then, Bear heard a noise. A happy, I don't sleep all winter or have fur or bees stinging my nose kind of noise. I wonder what it could be. What do you think it is? Quack! The sound was music to his ears. Oh, look, it's ducks. We like ducks. Yes, we do. It is not easy to do this one-handed, by the way. So Bear slipped into the line of happy yellow ducks. Quack! He chimed in. He watched the ducks' every move. Yes, he could get used to being a duck. In fact, he decided he was a good duck. Luckily, no one noticed the new duck until Bear let out a little too loud and happy quack. All right, you got some lines now, Peep. Stop right there, Bear. What do you think you're doing in our line? Snapped the duck. You don't belong here. That's not a happy duck. But please, said Bear, I don't want to be a bear anymore. Can you please teach me to be a duck? Please? Well, all right, said Duck. I guess I can help. How to be the perfect duck. How to be a duck, rule 1, nest building. Collect twigs and old leaves, build the nest, place egg in nest, sit on egg, keep egg safe and warm. Under no circumstances should you lose your egg. I don't think that's going very well for the bear. How to be a duck, rule 2, swimming. Waddle in the water, flap feet one at a time to swim. No splashing permitted. What fun is swimming if you can't splash? How to be a duck, rule 3, flying. Find a perfect hill for takeoff. This is not going to work out well. Run while flapping wings and keeping beak pointed upward. Once in the air, crash. Oh dear. Oh dear. Dear, dear, dear. This was definitely not going as planned. Bear wasn't good at being a duck, after all. Duck felt sorry for Bear. Don't be sad, Bear. Look, you climbed a tree. Ducks can't do that. It's true. That's true. Ducks don't climb very well. Bear felt a little better. He decided to climb up and get that apple for Duck. The apple was very high and the branch was very bendy. Bear reached as far as he could when, boing! I'm flying, Bear called happily, just like a duck. But inside, Bear wasn't actually happy at all. Flying twisted his tummy, and the landing was far too tricky. Crash! I think I prefer climbing, he told Duck. Being a bear doesn't seem all that bad, said Duck. And you make a really good bear. And a really good friend. The end. Yeah, all right. That was a good story. Did you like that story? All right. This is what we do all the time downstairs. Can I come and read to you again sometime? Yes. All right. You guys say bye to Peep. Bye. All right. Bye, everybody. All right. Sometimes I do stuff just because I think it's fun. The bear needed to learn to be a bear. The bear needed to learn to be a bear, even though there were things he didn't like about being a bear. There's things he didn't find good about being a bear. But at the end of the day, the bear couldn't be a duck. The only thing he could be is a bear. Esther is learning the same lesson. Esther may not like being queen. She may not like what's going on. She may not like being a Jew and all the persecution that's happening. But she is the queen, and she is a Jew. And in order for the story to move forward, she has to recognize that, and she has to claim it. We all kind of have these opportunities in these times in our lives where it's only us. Only you can do something. Now, I would hope in my life I have not done anything to cause any forest fires because I took to heart what Smokey the Bear told me. But Smokey the Bear is about more than just that. Because not only we prevent forest fires, there are things that only we can do, the things we've been gifted to do, the things that God's put in our way, the things that God has given us the gifts and graces to be a part of. Claiming that is hard, because oftentimes it may cause us to go somewhere or do something we don't want to do in the moment. Or it may seem scary in the way that what Esther facing was seeming scary. And yet, there are things that only we can do. Now, years ago, A memory. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Facebook for showing me things that happened 12 years ago, so I can remember. Not really. But I was looking through Facebook stuff and looking through Facebook memories, and I was reminded of something that happened a long time ago. Now, if you want to, believe it or not, if you want to be in the Methodist Church anyway, if you want to be the person who stands up front and do what I do, they don't just let you do that. There's this whole process you have to go through. It's long and it's lengthy and it's intentionally institutional in its nature. But one of the things that you have to do early on in that process is they want you to take basically something akin to like an aptitude test, right? And they want to gauge like what you're interested in and what your interests are and those sorts of things. And so I had to do this. So I sat in a room once and filled out 1,000,001 little bubble sheets about whether I liked flower arranging. Literally, that was a question. Whether I liked talking to people, and all this sort of stuff. Now, unfortunately, this had come at a time in my life when I was having a little bit of a crisis. I was beginning this process to maybe think about not being an engineer anymore and coming into ministry, and I wasn't sure what that looked like, and I wasn't sure what it meant. And as I was going through this test, what I had in my mind was all of the things that I didn't want the tests to tell me, right? Which is not the way to do it, FYI. So I had all those things. I was like, don't tell me to do this. Don't tell me I'm supposed to do youth ministry because I tried that and I'm lousy at it. Love you, Becky Knowlton. Love you, Van and Christy Duvall. Thank you for taking that on. I was just like, I had all these things. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I only want to do this. So I was taking this test thinking, I'm an engineer and a really bright guy. If anybody can skew this test, like, I can make this say whatever I want it to say. Because I'm smart. No. And so we do it, we send it, it gets sent off to Nashville somewhere, and so it goes into the machine and comes back out. And my mentor, you have to have a mentor, my mentor gets the results first. And he sits down with me at lunch. And up until this point, he's been incredibly encouraging, he's incredibly excited. He says, yes, I think this would be, if you want to do this, I think you would be good, all that stuff. And he had this very interesting and unfamiliar, serious look on his face. And he's like, yeah, we might have a problem. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, well, I got your test results back. I said, okay. And he looked at me with all of that, like, the way that, pastors do with all that care and concern that they have that I don't naturally have. But all that care and concern, he looks at me, he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, are you all right? Things okay at home? And I'm like, yeah. Why do you ask? I'm like, well, I just wanted to make sure because I was looking at your test results and I'm not sure you're okay. And so I didn't know, if you don't know, it's actually possible to fail a test on your interests, but it is. If the test come back and says you have no interests. And he's like, I've never seen anybody score as low and as many categories as you signed low in. Are you sure you want to do this? To which at that point, I sort of had to confess. It's like, well, I might have been trying to game the test. And he's like, well, you didn't do a good job. And it became a bit of a thing. He's like, these kind of things, they can hick around. That's going to be in your file. I have a file. I know. There's a file somewhere, my name on it, and that test is in there. And so we need to talk about this, what's going on. And of course, it led to this really long conversation about what it was and what was bothering me and what is and what isn't. And he finally looked at me and said, look, man, you don't need to worry about any of that right now. You're at step 1. There are 99 more steps to go, right? Give it time. God will show you. You need to have this thing that we like to talk about a little bit around here called faith. You need to have faith that God's going to put a path in front of you. You need to have faith, even if you don't have it figured out right now, you will. You need to have faith, even though if everything seems scary right now, you're going to get through it. And on the other side, something will be greeting you. You need to stop worrying. This is the thing he said that I stuck with me the whole time. You need to stop worrying about what everyone else thinks you should be doing and worry about what you think you should be doing and what God is calling you to do. And then he gave me a pretty helpful warning. He's like, you're about to do stuff like go to seminary, which will be full of people telling you how you should do whatever it is you're doing. Oftentimes, the best thing you can do is not listen to them. And in that regard, he was very accurate. It might surprise you to know that in seminary, I did not get particularly high scores in preaching class. Some of you are like, we're not surprised about that at all. I actually had two different professors, and my first professor had this way, and he had this way in understanding of how preaching should go and what it should be like. And I remember the first time we had, in preaching class, you preach in front of your, fellow students, and you preach in front of your teacher, and then you get feedback. And I remember the first time I got feedback from this particular professor, he said, Jeremy's preaching has a quote-unquote stand-up comedy character to it. He did not mean that as a compliment. I took it as a compliment. He did not mean it that way. And then he went on to tell me he would do better too, and all this other stuff. And we would have conversations. He's like, because they would make you type up manuscripts. If you've noticed, I don't do that because I don't read well from a page. It's just not something I do very well. I get caught up and it doesn't work out. So I learned a long time ago just, how to use an outline and all that kind of stuff. Whenever I'm speaking, it's how I prefer to do it. He didn't particularly like that. He thought it should be done in a different way. And so at a certain point in that class, I just had to learn to smile and nod and all that stuff. And I remember trying to do it the way that he wanted us to do it. Trying to write everything out and be serious and not tell jokes and, all that sort of stuff. And I remember getting done, giving a sermon in class about it and getting the feedback. And he's like, that you were greatly improved. You should continue working on these things. And I had thought to myself, that giving that sermon in that way was the worst experience of my life. I hated every minute of it, and it led to this bit of a crisis. Like, if this is what this is, and this is what people expect, and this is what folks want, then maybe this isn't supposed to be for me. Thankfully, a fellow student in that class I shared that with, and he's like, don't worry about it. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You do things your way. He'll do things his way. God's working through you. God's working through him. It's all going to be okay. We all have things in life that are ours. We all have gifts and graces we've been given, a way of being that is ours, right? Some of us are better doing one thing, some of us are better doing others. I didn't know that I was good at holding a book in one hand and a puppet to the other. And I really don't like it when they give me big hardback books. I think they do it to be mean. No. I've literally had hand cramps. It's crazy. But along the way, we do discover these things about ourselves. We do discover the gifts and graces we've been given and the things that we can do that are only ours. So I think that's the challenge of Esther that we take from this moment in this part of the story. Esther has some work to do that's only hers, and it's big, and it's important, and it's literally going to save lives, and that's great. Sometimes in life, we will have those moments ourselves. Oftentimes, though, the moments are smaller. Oftentimes, though, the challenges and the opportunities are smaller. And the things and the opportunities we need to take advantage of, the things that we need to recognize are ours and ours alone to do, don't come in big flashy forms, but come in small little opportunities when you're asked a question, hey, would you want to come down and read to the kids one day? And you say, sure, that might be fun. Hey, do you want to be a part of this thing happening over here? Do you want to try something maybe you haven't tried before? Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. As people of faith, we have faith in a lot. But one of the things we have faith in is that God is working in our lives. That is not a question. Mordecai, in this story, has faith. One way or another, he expects his people to be delivered, with or without Esther's help. But with Esther's help, it's definitely going to be easier, and it's going to be better for her and better for everyone else. Mordecai has faith that deliverance will come, and faith that Esther can be part of that deliverance. We are to have faith in ourselves, faith that God put gifts into each one of us and gave us work to do. We all have a something. None of us can do everything, but we do all have a something, the something we are poised to do. The challenge is figuring out what it is. Amen.